Hello guys, welcome back. So as you see, we're going to be trying a new setup. I'm going to be adding sort of a window of my face on it. Some people tried to or ask me to do it, and I didn't see it as a bad idea. So there it goes. I'm actually currently using my uh, laptop's camera, which isn't as good as I'd want it to be. So very soon I think we're going to be buying a webcam or maybe a video camera. And if you want to aid us in the pursuit of this, you can email me. My email is in the description, and we're going to be I'll give you a way to maybe try and donate and help us in the pursuit of this. And the other thing is, if you know, or yeah, if you know anyone or anyone who's looking to buy or to sell his camera, or maybe has a webcam, or maybe you guys have somewhere I can get one of those, you can also email me, and we can conversate and have a plan on how we're going to do this thing. So today we're going to be looking at a game between Zadock, Nyakundi and Hugh Misiko. This game happened in the final round of the national championship, and the winner of this game will qualify for the second phase of the national team selection. So there was quite that much on the line during this as they play the game. So let's just dive in straight into the game and see what happened. So Zadock opened with pawn to d4, and Misiko replied with pawn to f5, as he had promised. He had actually mentioned that anyone who's going to play d4 against him is going to reply with the Dutch defense. So let's see what Zadock had prepared for him. So pawn to g3, knight to f6, bishop to e2 by Zadock, pawn to e6 by Hugh, knight to f3, bishop to e7, and now both players castle. Nothing too crazy. Castles, and now pawn to c4 by Zadock, pawn to d6 by Hugh. Maybe playing knight to e4 immediately is a plan. And now you can't really play knight to c3 immediately. You have to play maybe something like queen to c2, queen to d3, then play knight to c3 to actually challenge the knight in the center. But Hugh decides to play pawn to d6 immediately. And now knight to c3 by Zadock, knight to e4 by Hugh, queen to c2. Also queen to d3, a playable move in this position. And now Hugh goes for knight takes on c3. Zadock plays b takes on c3. Also queen takes on c3 is possible, but I'm guessing that he played b takes on c3 because he had a plan. So knight to c6, just continuing with development. Bishop to a3, developing the bishop, connecting the rooks, maybe someday preparing pawn to c5. Plans, who knows. Pawn to e5, and now pawn to e4 by Zadock, pawn to f4 by Hugh, and now rook a to d1, threatening that maybe one time we're going to capture the pawn in the center. And yeah, also developing this rook, keeping it on a central file. We can also now move back the bishop, and the rooks will be connected. So a good plan, all things considered. And now queen to e8 by Hugh, just getting off the center, and also preparing maybe queen to g6 at some point, because then you really want to apply as much pressure as you can on white's king side, because then all the pieces are staring down at the king side. Both the bishops are actually slicing through the board to the queen side. If you maybe add your queen on g6, it's also a threat. And eventually, if you maybe capture on g3 with your f pawn, the rook on f1 will also be staring down at the king side. So everything going as planned to Misiko. And now pawn to c5 by Zadock, going with the idea that if your opponent attacks you on one flank of the board, you better do it on the other side, because I mean, it's one of those things, one of those chess things. So pawn to g5, Misiko also doing the same. And now c takes d, and Zadock played d takes on e5, d takes back on e5, and he played here pawn to h3, maybe anticipating pawn to g4 at some point. And also notice that the bishop on e3 is actually not hanging, because then if you take the bishop on e3, just queen to b3 with check, just wins back the bishop. So instead, after pawn to h3, Hugh first of all played bishop to e6, now negating the idea that queen to b3 check will regain the bishop, and now the bishop on e3 is actually hanging. So bishop to d6 by Zadock, saying that if you want to trade, you can trade it on my terms. And now bishop takes, rook takes on d6, and queen to d7, just defending the pawn on g5, simultaneously attacking the rook on d6. Rook f to d1, doubling up on the d file, and now f takes on g3. So in this position, the first thing that came to my mind when I was looking at the game is, does pawn to g4 work? Why play f takes on g3 if pawn to g4 works? So I don't know if Misiko considered this, or maybe he had a different plan. Obviously he had a different plan, and I think he did consider this. And the idea that I had in this position is, if f takes on g3, we're going to play bishop takes on g3, and we're going to exploit the awkward positioning of this rook on d6. So the rook has to actually move back to d3. Let's say he plays something else that isn't rook 6, moves back to d3. Maybe he moves the other rook from d1 to d3. Here we can actually take on g3, and if he takes back, we take on f3, and believe it or not, it's winning a piece, because if bishop takes back, we just play rook takes on f3, and if rook takes back, we now play rook takes on d6. Look at the position. Black is just a knight up in this position, completely winning, I think. So f takes on g3 was played by Hugh Misiko instead. Now f takes g3 and knight to d4, exploiting the positioning of this rook on d6 in another way that is not the way I had thought possible. And now you really have to capture the knight. There's no other move possible in this position. Queen takes on d6, and now knight takes on f5. So in exchange for that piece, because then it's a rook for a knight, in exchange of that piece, white has these two doubled pawns at the center. They're actually passed pawns, and they're going to become a very huge threat, or maybe that's the plan, to make them become a very huge threat. And in this position, you have to look at queen to a3 and see if it works. I think, okay, this was not played in the game, but I think Hugh Misiko had actually calculated and seen this line, and I don't know what really deterred him from playing it. Maybe he was too afraid that these pawns are going to become strong. But then the idea in this position is the queen on a3 attacks the pawn on a2 and the pawn on g3 at the same time, and white has to defend one of them. So let's say he plays maybe rook to h2, king to h2 rather. We play queen takes on a2, queen takes on d2, and now after bishop takes on d2, after bishop takes on d2, we play the position, as in the position is now very dynamic, or maybe very double-edged, because then if he plays something like pawn to d5, we can immediately play pawn to a5, and it becomes this threat, this race actually of who promotes first. But I don't think that white actually has any threat in this position to promote, because then we as black have two rooks on the starting rank, whereas not on the starting, but on the 8th rank, whereas white has only one rook defending the promotion square. So it's going to be really hard for white to play this position. Maybe bring back the knight in some way first and try and continue the game. But you can even play bishop to b3, pawn to a4, and just continue pushing the pawn all the way. So very tricky position to play, and I think this was the right way to go, but I'm not sure why Misiko didn't play it. So Misiko played rook a to c8, and this is a sort of a confession, or a concession rather. It is sort of a concession of the idea of pushing these pawns, because then if you really want to push those pawns, you'll have to waste another tempi to bring the rook back to a8. So with this, I think Misiko just conceded and said he's not going for that plan. So queen to d2 by Zadock, pawn to h6, and now pawn to h4, immediately adding more pressure on the pawn on g5, and now queen to d8, continuing with the defending of the pawn on g5, and now pawn to d5 by Zadock. So queen to b6 was played, and now queen to d4, blocking the check. The queen trade is actually forced in this position, and after rook takes back, Hugh played, okay, so the bishop is hanging, but Hugh played rook to c1 with check first. King went to h2, and now he played bishop to, not bishop, but rook to d8, exploiting the fact that you can't really capture the bishop because the rook is hanging on d4. The rook is hanging on d4, the rook. So h takes on g5, h takes on g5. And here Zadock played rook to d3. Another idea or another plan that I thought, okay, so the purpose of playing rook to d3 in this position is to defend this rook and actually now threaten taking the bishop. So what I thought was a better plan to defend the rook was knight to f3, because knight to f3 simultaneously even attacks the pawn on g5, and you can't really push this pawn, because if you push the pawn you take the bishop, and now the rook trade here is forced, because if you take the knight you can always take with check first, and you have to move, then we win back the piece. So here the rook trade is actually forced, and after rook takes, knight takes, we get this position where it's not really clear who's winning, but then in my opinion I think white has an easier task to win this position. It's not really hard for white. The white's king is actually hard to get, is hard to attack, harder to attack than black's queen. Black's king actually is out in the open, and it's going to be easier to exploit that. The pawn on e6 is just heading for promotion. We can always play, maybe play something like rook to d1 just for analysis sake. We can even play knight to f5 and threaten to push and push again this pawn and actually win. So really hard for black to play this position in my opinion. And yeah, I think this is one of the ways that the rook could have been defended. So instead Zadock played rook to d3, also a solid way of defending. And now bishop all the way back to c8 by Hugh Misiko. Knight to f3 now, and now king to g4, king to g7 rather. The idea is you can't really capture after king to g7. It looks like it's a free pawn, but it really isn't, because if you take, then rook to h8 just wins for black. You have to play your knight back to h3, and now after bishop takes, rook to c2 with check, you have to move away from the defense of the bishop on h3. So here after knight to f3, king to g7 was played, and Zadock played pawn to g4 with the idea that if you take the pawn, I just take yours. So here Misiko played king to g6, king to g3 was played by white, and now rook to c5. Didn't really understand this move. I think it was to prevent the pushing of this pawn, maybe. I have no idea why rook to c5 was played. And now knight to e5 with check, king to f6, knight back to f3, and now rook to e8. Now completely stopping the idea of pushing this pawn. So the pawn was pushed regardless, and now you have to give back the material. Rook takes back, knight takes, king takes, and now pawn to d6 by Zadock, and now bishop to d7, and the game is now getting closer to drawish territory. Bishop takes on g7, rook to c4. Yeah, rook to c4. Bishop went back to f3, just defending the pawn on g4. And now rook to a4, attacking the pawn. Pawn to a3, and now rook to d4, just offering the trade of rooks. King takes, rook takes rook, king takes rook, and king to f2 now. King to e5, king to e3, king takes on e6, on d6, king takes, king to d4. Sorry about that, I lost track. And this, I think the game continued a little bit, but the game ended in a draw, and this is, I think, a very good final position. So I don't really have the entire PGNs. It's really hard to get PGNs in Kenya, because then the recording sheets are hard to find after the games, and if you actually find them, you have to pray that those people have a good handwriting that's actually readable, because some people just don't care about recording. So yeah, this was the game, and with this draw, none of them qualified for the second phase of the national team selection. And yeah, decent game, actually a very good game, and I think it's open to analysis. You can actually take the PGN and maybe find if there's some things that I had missed, or maybe some things that you actually want to analyze more, or maybe, go deeper into. And so many people ask why I get so many games of Zadock. It's because he shares a lot of his games with me. So the other players, it's actually hard to get because you have to find their PGNs. They never send their PGNs. So yeah, that was the game. And again, if you have any information on where I can get a good webcam, because then my laptop's camera is actually so bad, you can email me and we can talk about it. So yeah, this was the game. I'm going to be looking at more games from the nationals, and this is a good place to start. So yeah, with that, have an amazing rest of your week.